This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, the sound of trumpets in the distance signaling the arrival of angels, Brian Murray.
Hello.
And Nick White.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited for the end of times. But before we get into that, we're here to talk about comic books because we have the thing that we do every single week on this show, and that is talk about comic books with friends and fans alike all at once. So I've got two legally mandated questions that I need to ask you, and that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
You know, I've been fine on this extended weekend. Didn't get a chance to fully finish today's Formula One race. It's Monaco, so that's a joke. It really doesn't matter. Pretty much the race was determined yesterday, but maybe I'm wrong.
And that's mostly because the starting line order determines the race, because there's basically nowhere to pass in Monaco.
Because
if I remember
the
correctly.
Cars are way too big now, and it's a problem. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But it stays on the race calendar because it's 70 years and it's historic and it's a beautiful location and all the rich people show up and everybody loves that. So it truly is a sport of the working class, if anything ever was. As in, they are working real hard to afford that $80 baseball cap that it costs. So, but yeah, aside from that, things have been good. Got some opportunities to get some reading done, and got some real great opportunities to just aimlessly scroll through a bunch of my streaming apps, decide that there's really nothing I want to watch, and then just put on some sort of long form video essay on YouTube about, I don't know, fucking like serial arsonists or stationary preferences or any of the other things that I pay attention to.
Did you watch Jenny Nicholson's 4-hour Star Wars hotel diatribe?
When I saw how long that video was, I was like, no.
Nick, you saw how long that video was, said no, and then watched 4.5 hours of smaller videos. I guarantee it.
Yeah. I'm laughing, but we're going to talk about this later. How dare you gaze into my soul so intimately? 4 hours later, this is way more. I feel way more accomplished. But Mike, I got to get us back on track. You just can't keep doing this to me.
I know.
We're here to talk about comics. Let's talk about things that I read this week, and that would be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Black, White, and Green. This is from IDW. Contributors on this book are, in this order, for the story Green Screen, writing, art, and cover duties by Declan Shalvey, letters by Nathan Wittick, The Brutal Sword of Leonardo, art and story by Jesse Lonergan, writing and story by Dave Baker, letters by Nathan Wittick. We have The Flame That Fuels You by Gigi Dutria and Lorenzo Hall, writing, art by Gigi Dutria, letters by Nathan Wittick. And finally, we have Identity Theft, story and art by Paulina I even listened to a video. I'm going to get this right. Paulina Ganesho, and letters by Nathan Wittick. So for those not aware, Black, White, and Green is a 4-part anthology series that includes such talent as Declan Shalvey, Jock, and Tyler Boss, and it runs through August 2024 as part of IDW's 40th anniversary celebration of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Jeepers.
Yeah.
40 years of these goddamn Teetles.
They're still teenagers. That's incredible.
It's like Bart Simpson.
Yeah, it basically, yeah. I think Bart's got to be older. I don't know. Probably. They're close. And it's good that this anniversary thing is going on, because otherwise you might kind of look at IDW's recent financial troubles, or the train wreck that was the IDW's original imprint that launched back in April of 2022, or the departure of G.I. Joe and Transformers for Skybound at the end of 2022. And you kind of might wonder if IDW is throwing pretty much all that they've got behind the only thing that seems to be working. And look, like, I take no joy in saying this. I think IDW has published some really solid things over the years. I really personally really enjoyed the originals imprint. I
Mm-hmm.
thought Dead Seas was great. I thought Arca was great. I think Earth Divers, which is still going on, is great. I thought what is that book called? The G. Willow Wilson fantasy series,
That
Hunger in the Dusk,
was that a
maybe?
Dark Horse? I thought,
No, that's an IDW original. It was one of the weird ones that managed to somehow survive them like
dude.
shutting it all down.
That's okay. So okay, this is the fourth time in as many weeks where that I've attributed a Dark Horse or a Boom book incorrectly, and it turns out it was an IDW originals. That's crazy. Um, okay, yeah.
Maybe that's
I
why it
mean,
didn't do
if
well.
Brian hit the nail on the head. Yeah, when people are constantly being like, "Yeah, IDW couldn't have done that," it definitely wasn't them.
Exactly.
Oh boy. Um, but so many of those books I thought were solid, which again,
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. Definitely doesn't mean it's going to work out for you. Um, but it does really honestly feel like IDW is maybe trying to like desperately shuffle all of their eggs into the same basket. At least with this 40th anniversary thing going on, you could be like, oh no, this isn't like a you know desperation move. We're just trying to really celebrate that, and that's why we're doing this one shot, and that's why we're doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Saturday morning cartoon. That's why we're doing the Last Ronin 3 part 2, the prequel,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're on at this point, which now has a video game tie-in, blah blah blah,
And a movie,
um,
maybe.
and a movie maybe. That said, like, I don't know, can you blame them? If it's one of the few things you've got left, I don't know what to say. But I digress. Overall, Black, White, and Green, it's pretty much exactly what you want to see from an anthology book. You've got a wide variety of stories. You've got some real differing sort of tones going on, some sort of differing focuses, some really different aesthetics, one from the next. Although I will point out what's kind of interesting because we've got Marvel's Black, White, and Blood surrounding the Alien series. They've got an anthology book going on at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
Their
I
book
mean,
sort of had. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
so has DC though. DC's been doing like Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Red, and Black and White Batman. Everybody's just
Yeah,
copying everybody.
yeah,
It's a
and I think.
scheme to not pay colorists.
Oh boy. And in the same vein, I think Marvel's actually also concurrently running like a Darth Maul, I think, Black, White, and Red book
They
at the
did a
exact
Darth
same.
Vader one. I'm not sure if there is also
I
a Darth
think
Maul
they're
one or
doing
not.
Maul right now. Don't quote me on
Insane.
that. But yeah, what's going on, guys? But what's interesting is that Black, White, and Green does not have sort of a serialized anchor story that's sort of going from one volume to the next, which is what Black, White, and Blood is doing. This is like pure anthology.
Right.
Every story seems to literally begin and end within whatever issue it's in. Um, but I do really like what we get here. I'll just briefly go through some of these stories and some of the things I thought were effective or not. I did really enjoy Declan Shalvey's story. It kind of gets into Donatello's obsession with machines, and I think people are always like, "Oh, he's such a geek. He just really loves computers and all of this." But Shalvey kind of takes it from the angle of like maybe he really loves machines and stuff like this because there's just like a potential lack of confidence when it comes to getting out there on the streets and getting his hands dirty and worried about effectively being part of a team. It's sort of an interesting angle. I wouldn't say it's one we've never seen before,
Mm-hmm.
but I liked the perspective. I really also, kudos to Shalvey. He found ways to use sort of different eye shapes and different beak shapes to really differentiate between the turtles because, of course, we can't do it with the bandanas. We really can't do it with the different color belts because, of course, those things are off the table. I think he
Have them
does
holding their
also.
weapons at all times.
Right. You got to hold the weapons at all times, or you got to follow the Saturday morning cartoon, which I believe is where they started putting the letters on the belts.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I think Shalvey gets away with using the letters on the belts as well, but I don't remember exactly. But with the eye shapes, he makes Raphael's much more angular and sort of like glinting and glaring and aggressive, and Mikey's are much more circular and round and sort of neutral and friendly looking. He finds different ways, really subtle, small ways, to sort of differentiate them without them constantly calling each other by their first name with every single statement. Beyond that, let's talk about the Jesse Lonergan story, The Brutal Sword of Leonardo. Look, Jesse Lonergan is Jesse Lonergan is Jesse Lonergan. Either you love his art or you hate his art. I think it's pretty polarizing. I absolutely love it. Dave Baker lets him play to his strengths. This story is definitely a real sword and sandal, warrior out of time, Conan-esque parallel kind of narrative going on. It really reminds me a lot of Lonergan's somewhat recent work for Dark Horse on Miss Truesdale and the Fall of Hyperborea, which was also about like a very sword and sandal gladiator fantasy historical warrior narrative. The interesting thing is Shalvey used the green to pop elements on the page that he wanted you to pay attention to, and Lonergan just basically hits everything with just this huge wash of like Nickelodeon slime from the beginning to the end of this story, and it can feel a little muddied in some ways. It's interesting to see sort of an inverse color application, but it does get a little hard sometimes to sort of distinguish different elements on the page. Still, it's great to see Lonergan. It's always interesting to see really interesting or out there artists rendering hyper iconic characters. So getting to see him work on this is interesting. Baker really leans into this idea of the turtles being whisked off to strange and bizarre lands, which has definitely been a pretty frequent trope for the turtles.
I mean, Dave Baker read the first dozen chapters of TMNT and said, "Oh yeah, you can pretty much do anything with these fuckers." Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, did Dave Baker read the original book? He 100%. Like, he doesn't have the bipedal humanoid triceratopses with laser guns, but it's not that much of a departure from that. Yeah, Baker isn't afraid to let this book get weird, and it's also an interesting story because it kind of explores this sort of person, or I guess you would say turtle, the turtle that Leo could or can become if he's isolated and left to himself, and sort of the darker side of that, which we've also seen explored before, but it's nice to kind of see it again. Flame That Fuels You, interesting aesthetic. It definitely looks like it was done with like markers, which was neat. It uses a wider variety of shades of green. Also, I appreciated that. Aesthetically interesting. The narrative being, hey, Raphael has anger problems that maybe he needs to tend to. It's a little rote, but you got 8 pages or whatever. Not everything is going to always be, again, the other stories we've seen here as well, not things we haven't seen before, but I think they were better variations on a theme than this one was. And finally, Paulina Ganashow's story. Sorry to pigeonhole you, Paulina. I knew when I saw your name on this book, I knew we were going to get adorable Toidles. And sure enough, panel number 2, we've got, I think, Michelangelo with sparkly eyes. And of course we were. And also, that's what I wanted. Also, that's what I expected.
Dude, I'm looking at some of her turtle art right now. Yeah, these are the most. This is like when Kara Shimborski says turtles or toidles or teetles. This is what I think of, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Also, Paulina finds a really creative way to utilize the green in her story and to really isolate it to a particular part of the story. I'll say that it involves a semi-intelligent bottle of slime. Maybe it's ooze, considering it's the turtles. But it's brief, it's charming, it's cute. The only issue I have with this story, it's so nitpicky and small, and probably shouldn't bring it up.
You don't have to say it, Nick. It's fine.
But I'm already halfway there, guys. Look, I have my obligations and duties as a critic, and I do have to say this. I can't distinguish the turtles from one another. I've read enough turtles at this point that it's look at the beaks, look at the body shapes, look at the belt, Look at the weapons. Things like this. I can't tell them apart. I can't do it.
I gotta see
So
this. I gotta grab this issue. I don't know what I'm doing not having this issue in my collection right now. I gotta see this.
Look, you gotta support anthology books. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. I mean, I don't know why they're getting so popular again. It's sort of makes me worried that I'm gonna have to start hating on them if they continue to start getting popular again. Yeah. Look, I am I am as fair weather a friend as you can get, guys. So
I'm
you know,
aware. I'm aware.
yeah.
I've known you for many, many years, Nick. Well, before Nick goes and says anything that could get this show canceled around Turtles,
My
Brian,
therapist is gonna hear about this.
Brian, what is
Go
on the
ahead.
top of your or what have you been reading? Sorry, lost myself.
Yeah, you got Mike all mixed up.
I'm all mixed up.
I read some of the classic bonkers crossover shit that I love.
Hell yes.
Predator versus Wolverine.
Okay.
This is written by Benjamin Percy with art and colors from a whole mess of folks because they have a different artist and colorist team for each like flashback time period.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Because our book begins with Wolverine fighting a Yautja, one of the predators, in quote unquote modern day. And then it flashes back to his first run in with this creature in the year 1900 in Alaska. And over the course of this book, we get like cuts back to the present day, and then we flash back to a different time period. So we see him, in his X-Men days, and we see him like in the very recently post adamantium infusion days. And I think it's very cool because each one of those fights or encounters happens differently. So you might have like at one point he's training in Japan and gets attacked, and the only reason he gets out of that is because the Hand shows up to try and kill him, and the Predator decides it doesn't want to deal with that, so he just fucks off. Which is fair, which is probably what I would do in that situation as well.
I do appreciate the fact that, like, for anyone who thinks that this is like gimmicky or stupid, like Predator and Alien have tried and mostly succeeded to cross over with anything and everything and tried to jump into almost any and every time period possible. So like there's precedence for all of this. Like I'm pretty sure the Predator fought Vikings at one point, even might have been Alien, but and then of course we've got the movie Prey, and there's plenty of other things where they jump into all time periods and whatnot. So
yeah, there are short story collections for both Alien and Predator that take you through all kinds of different time periods. It's very cool. What I think is kind of cool, and Wolverine actually calls this out at one point, that like after the adamantium was bonded to his skeleton, he became the greatest prize that a Predator could seek.
Oh god, yeah,
Because,
probably.
yeah, he is now like a unique skull to hang on the wall. There's not another skull like his in the galaxy.
There's probably literally like a reserved spot on the shelf that they're like, one fucking day we're gonna get this guy.
Yeah. And it is like, Wolverine has the healing factor, so you kind of know how this fight is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know that eventually Wolverine will either defeat or outlive this Predator.
Right.
But I think the book still manages to be fun, in part because of those different ways you see Wolverine reacting to it in his different stages of life. And they definitely lean into the gore a little bit with this book. Like, with the Predator, with the shoulder mounted plasma launcher, you do get to see like heads blown up and bits and pieces of Wolverine just like taken off in chunks.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't think it crosses the line. It's not like Invincible level gory.
Yeah.
See, well, I mean, okay, that's like, I mean, what you're telling me is it's not the absolute worst that it could be, period.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Brian, but like I feel like Marvel was like, don't worry guys, it's gonna be M. Like I don't know if you remember like the first issue when they got Alien and they like blew off someone's face with like a shotgun at like point blank in the first issue or whatever. And I'm like,
Yes.
Jesus Christ. And they're like, yeah, we're mature, guys. We're mature. We can do this. It's a Marvel book. Do you remember Marvel Max? We've done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite Marvel Max.
Okay.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed this because I was kind of on the fence about this because, and I know hilariously enough, I'm probably the only one with this problem. Like, I felt like I knew more about Predator than Wolverine, and I was like, am I gonna know enough about Wolverine to read this book?
Yeah. I think that's a valid question. How does this tie
Yeah.
into the Krakoa era, the fall of X? How does this tie in?
Yeah.
You know,
It
What are the
doesn't.
bigger canonical implications?
good.
The there are X-Men characters that only get first named in the X-Men section, but if you know who Kitty is in the X-Men, you're gonna be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I trust Percy because he did I don't know if you remember, he did like the one shot for the, I think, Aliens 30th anniversary book. Do you remember this? It was like involved like ice aliens, like aliens had like mutated into this like icy form. Do you remember this? It came out like
Yeah,
last year or the year before.
vaguely.
Yeah.
It was
pretty
the
good.
annual, wasn't it?
I think it was a one shot because the Alien annual actually jumped back to the original storyline with that first guy that you were
Okay.
following. Yeah. But I thought Percy did a great job with that. When I heard he was on this, I was like, okay, like this could be interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I mean it's definitely not gonna like blow your mind or change the way you see Wolverine. But if you want
Sure.
like a fun summer read, I think this is definitely one to look for.
Okay, gotcha.
Start your summer of pain with Predator versus Wolverine. I like that. It's a good pitch. Well, for me this week, I've been having strange sleeping pattern dreams, things like almost like fever dreams where they're very vivid. And then I wake up and realize that no, I'm not at a Billie Eilish concert in a cave. Last night though, I don't know if the dream that I had about, basically being lost in a car, which was also a forest, was influenced by this book that I read, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, which happens to be one of those IDW books that Nick was talking about that I mistakenly thought was published by IDW, by Boom Studios, but it turns out it was by IDW. This book, I remember when this got announced, it was super hyped, and then I heard that IDW was like canceling all their originals, and I was like, oh man, I'm never going to read that book. And then it turns out that book came out, and I missed it pretty much until the second to last issue came out and went, oh, well, shit. And so I bought all of it, and I meant to sit down and just like read 1 or 2 issues last night. And instead I read all 6 issues in a sitting. Like I did not get up. The book is that good. This is written and drawn by Patrick Horvath with letters by Hassan Osmani Elhau. Patrick also does the coloring on this book. But yeah, I will say just before I get into this, warning, there's a lot of gore and murder talk that I'm going to go through really quick. So if you're not into that, skip ahead, use the chapters in your podcast player of choice. But Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees is a book about a serial killer in a little nice, quaint, anthropomorphized animal town where everybody looks just like happy-go-lucky. And God, if Patrick Horvath drew anything else that was like all ages, it would be very fun and friendly, and I would love to look at it. But instead, this is a book about a happy, friendly little town where one of the people, our main character, Samantha, is a murderer, a serial murderer who has been murdering people for 20 plus years by going into the big city from her small town, finding a random person on the street, abducting them, taking them out to the big forest, cutting them up into pieces. And that's just what she does. This isn't a huge
Important to have
spoiler.
hobbies.
Yeah, it's exactly. I'm pretty sure that is what she says in the book, that it isn't. So there is like a tongue-in-cheekness to this book, but the focus of the book is, while Samantha is this killer who lives in this little town, she is the friendly neighbor who works at the hardware store. That is like her job. And everyone in town kind of has their own, little troubles and stuff, but it's all very quaint. And she is secretly this murderous person. And I don't think this is a spoiler because I think this is in the synopsis, but suddenly someone is killed in her hometown, and killed in a way that is very presentational. And Samantha knows that if cops are going to be in her town looking around at potentially another murderer, well, she might accidentally have left traces of her own. So she's very concerned about this, and she thinks she needs to get to the bottom of it. I cannot express how exciting this book was. Like, if you're not into murder, blah blah blah, like books like that, maybe this isn't for you, because there's some gruesome stuff, right? Like people getting cut up, anthropomorphized people getting cut up. But on top of that, there is this murder mystery aspect to it, where Samantha is trying to solve this mystery before the cops do. But this is a small town cop thing, so like, how good are they actually going to be at solving a murder? And she kind of knows what the telltale signs are of things, and she just step after step after step in this book is just nonstop, like, interesting twists and turns that somehow make 6 issues of a comic book feel like 12 issues of a comic book, to the point where if this book was 12 issues or 24 issues of just Samantha trying to figure out who done it, getting to know the town, I would have read all of it, and I would have read it voraciously. This book reads super fast because of how, like, I don't want to say it moves at a breakneck speed, but like, I don't know, if you're binge watching like a very exciting, thriller TV show, like, it feels like an hour passes really quick. So you're flying through this book trying to figure out what's happening, as well as just to see how Horvath has decided to kind of depict this world, right? Like, everybody is drawn so nicely and so like friendly, and then on the backside of everything there is this murderous thing. And the thing that I love about the book is when we get to go into the big city in the series, the way that Horvath draws the big city, like, it feels like a New York or Chicago or LA or something. So like, to see all of these happy-go-lucky anthropomorphized, animals who are normally in like farm gear or like nice little like button-up shirts, instead dressed like somebody who lives in a city, it's kind of like really, really funny to see. And I love that he didn't try to like change the style of the book at all. It just like, these are the people that live out in the rural country, and these are like the urbanites who live in the city. And I love that he kept a consistent feeling, but like, knows that people dress and act and appear and stand differently in a city, and you can just see it in the way that he draws everything. So this book is absolutely gorgeous. If I haven't expressed the beauty of this book yet enough, it's so like perfectly colored, like perfectly drawn to envelop that feeling of like a childhood storybook, but then offering these gritty, gross moments where you're like, oh wait, no, this isn't a book for adults. God help anybody who accidentally stumbles into this book, think, look at the bright colors on the cover of this, and then it gets a little dark. But yeah, like I said, I would not have complained about another 12 or 16 or 20 issues of this series, like, if it was just like a big detective whodunit type of thing. But I think for 6 issues, this is like one of the best collected edition comics you're probably going to be able to buy this year. Long and short, like, every single issue is satisfying and has a nice, just like, amount of story in it. The wrap up ending of the book is maybe the only complaint that I have. I won't go into details on it, but like, the book ends very quickly. Obviously, it's 6 issues long, which is why I think, like, man, there could have been another 10 issues if Horvath wanted to, just to like stamp out some of the little tiny details. Like, he does cover everything up. Everything does get wrapped up at the end, but it is a little bit fast, because I feel like the first 5 issues have the perfect amount of breathing room, and just that last issue, maybe it just needed another like 8 pages just to wrap something up. But overall, really, really love this. Like, this is 5 out of 5 all across the board. Every single issue was a 5 banger for me. So like, highly recommend this if you're looking for something that's like pretty gruesome, but definitely kind of messes with you from like the look of the book and the feel of the book. I really enjoyed that, and Horvath totally delivers from start to finish. So that is Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, number 1 through 6.
Yeah, this sounds like Richard Scarry meets Mindhunter, so I will definitely be picking this
I
up.
was gonna say Dexter, but yeah.
Yeah, Dexter is definitely a good comparison.
Sounds like a 5 bags of popcorn.
Yes, you got it. But let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that are on the top of our pile, whether they're new or old or just something we're trying to read off of our shelf. Before we get into it, I'm going to shout out some of the folks that are hanging out with us on our Discord. If you're on our Discord, you can get a mention and a shout out just by being here and listening to the show live, or just responding to the Doombot when he calls for your top of your pile picks. This week, folks on the Discord are reading. Jeff is going to be reading Initial D, Volume 5. Aaron is going to be reading Limbo by Deb J.J. Lee. Danny's going to be reading Wolverine number 50. And Paul G is going to be reading Her Hard-Boiled Heart, which is a Kickstarter that I also have on my to-read list, but I'll be reading after the book that I'm going to talk about. But I guess to kick things off, Brian, what is on the top of your pile this week?
I know I'm showing up a little bit late to this book, but I'm going to read Delicious in Dungeon Volume 1.
Oh my.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Created by...
Sorry, that's me being very excited.
Created by Ryoko Kui, and translated by Taylor Engel. The brief rundown of this book, for anybody who's not aware, is that these characters are trying to get back to the place they were basically booted out of a dungeon. And in order to save time and money, they are going to be feeding on whatever monsters they kill along the way. And I've been watching the anime because that has been coming out for a couple of months now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good. It definitely, like, it gave me the taste for this book. And now that...
Nice one. Good
Oh, God, I didn't even think about that. Oh, boy. Anyway, now that I want more of it, the show is not coming out fast enough for me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the responsible thing, by which I mean the irresponsible thing, by which I mean I went online and immediately bought all 13 volumes of this book.
Oh boy, howdy.
So that was, probably not a good financial decision, but definitely a good call in the long run, because if I like this book even half as much as I like the anime, I'm going to be blowing through all 13 volumes in a week or two.
Hell yes. We love to hear it, Brian. I'm so excited. The final volume comes out in July, so you are basically caught up if you read all 13, and then volume 14 is out in a month and some change. So, you can get hyped and get ready for the end, because it's going to be great. I'm very excited for it.
I don't know if I'm excited to hear about that being the final volume or not. Like, on the one hand, it's nice that it's ending, but
yeah. Here's the thing. Well, I think I've said this before on the show, but I'll say it again. The joke on the internet that I've seen through a series of Tumblr posts and Pixiv translated forum comments is that Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and then the next week they announced the end of Delicious in Dungeon, because Ryoko Kui is like a known Baldur's Gate, like, hardcore 500 plus hours player on like the original ones. And so they announced Baldur's Gate 3 coming out, and she announced the end of the series.
Yeah, I'm done.
That being said, having read all the way through 13, it does feel like since volume 10 or 11, the series has kind of been coming to this humongous climax of an ending. So I'm very excited to see what you think, because I am not completely caught up on the anime. I think I'm like 4 or 5 episodes behind, but it seems like they've gotten through the first 6-ish or 7 volumes. So I think they'll probably do another season and maybe wrap up the show. So I'll be curious to hear what you think once you get through those 13 volumes about like where the story goes, because boy, oh boy, like it goes places, and in a very fun and an exciting way. Like, I think the big pivotal moment in the anime is the same as the one that's in the manga. And then the book just like goes off in a new direction where you're like, okay, this is what the story is about now, which I personally really, really like. So, trying not to spoil so I'm being very vague, but like it's good. It's very good. I think you'll be happy with it.
I do think it's funny that one of the main antagonists is the mad mage at the bottom of this dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just wrapping up a 4+ year game of D&D where we were playing the Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Yeah.
So I think that timing is just kind of perfect.
Yeah, that's now you have to just like retroactively fit the Mad Mage in that game with the Mad Mage that is in the manga / anime. So that's all. Pretty easy, right? Well, let me talk about what is on the top of my pile. Nick, I put this wrong in the doc. You're going last.
That's fine.
I am going to be reading The Winter King. This is a Kickstarter that ended very recently by Matt Emmons. This is the same person who brought us the absolute banger of a comic book, maybe one of the best comic books I've ever read, The Council of Frogs, who I made a D&D campaign off of, like crazy, amazing book. You should all go read The Council of Frogs. But The Winter King, this is from the same creator. It's a 42-page little graphic novel. It's a Riso printed zine comic kind of thing. Completely wordless. It's about a coyote surviving during a strange winter. I skimmed through some of the pages because the digital edition of this book recently got dropped to all the Kickstarter backers. You can go pre-order a copy of this yourself if you want, from Matt Emmons' site, secondatbestpress.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But it looks to be like a very just like, this is just animals hanging out. There's no words and all this stuff. And then spooky, weird stuff starts to happen. But since there's no dialogue, we don't really know what anybody thinks about that. And I kind of like that. I really love Matt Emmons' art. I love the way he draws animals, like in general, like the Council of Frogs is just full of all sorts of animals and beautiful nature-ish stuff. And I highly recommend everybody go read that just to get like a sample. He's also did another book called The Gardener, which is also full of kind of sci-fi-ish things, like this weird mix of like nature and sci-fi all together. It's a much bigger book, but yeah, I'm just excited to sit down and actually read this. I'm really excited for the Riso print book to come because I love Riso print comics. Like these 4-color things that are usually like stapled together. Sometimes they're bound. It depends on the publisher, but I'm guessing that this is just going to be like a staple job, and it's going to just be really, really pretty. If you look at the book itself, like even the preview pages, you can tell the color choice was very intentional to look a certain way digitally, but then it will print in a way that will reflect those color patterns in a way that Riso print does things where there's kind of like this off-centered imperfectness to it. So I'm very excited to see what it looks like printed, but I'll probably read through the digital edition and then maybe right after the show, and then read through the physical edition when I get it probably later this summer. So the Winter King looks beautiful. Honestly, everyone just go buy everything that Matt is doing. He's done some incredible work, and I absolutely love like everything that he does. So that's me. But Nick, what is on the top of your pile this week?
Before I get to my book, I do want to briefly point out that it looks like Paul G in the chat has said that he also has that book on his pre-order pile.
Yeah.
So, one of you is going to have to cancel because I know how you feel about Kickstarters, Mike.
No, the Kickstarter's already ended, Nick. Do you not understand how Kickstarters work? Come on, man. It's already done.
I mean, you just get a blank envelope and you put a few dollars and you put it in the mailbox and maybe something happens.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
You're not totally wrong.
Yeah. Like you're not that.
Millennials don't know how to do cursive or write a letter and all of that those other things that apparently we're not supposed to be capable of, or at least maybe that's Gen Z. Let's just for some clicks and views, let's talk about the differences between millennials and Gen Z.
I'm going to clip this. I'm going to clip this right now. So go ahead.
Yeah. Let's just set all of all of ourselves against one another, as sort of a,
It's fine because none of the main things that Gen Z has said about us hurts my feelings at all. So it's fine.
Nick, I know you got a tight 5 on this, but we can maybe move on. We don't have to do this. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. We'll save it for my TikTok because apparently that's where all of the Gen Z versus millennial stupid channels exist.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about Dawnrunner number 3. This is written by Ram V, art by Evan Cagle, colors by Dave Stewart, and letters by Aditya Bidikar, I believe. We've had that name on the show enough. I should know that name by now. So for those of you who haven't jumped on this book yet, first off, you should. This is from Dark Horse. It is not from IDW being misattributed as Dark Horse. Believe me, I looked after our recent conversation. So this is set just short of 100 years after a portal opens up over Central America. And of course, it's not well-wishers dropping by for some sort of intergalactic block party. It's an alien species known as the Tetza, or at least that's what we've called them. They come in all shapes and forms, which is nice to see that Earth's invaders have embraced the strength of diversity long before we have. But they all seem to be share the commonality of being massive in size and quite thick-skinned in a literal sense. I don't know how they respond to verbal abuse. So Earth tries a couple things to kill them. Most of it really doesn't work. A lot of people die. Eventually, they build the wall.
Finally.
Oh boy.
Finally.
oh boy.
It's worked so well in Pacific Rim. I'm excited to see how it goes
boy.
here.
Yeah. Attack on Titan too.
Sometimes I ask Mike what he's up to, and he says, and I don't know what that means, and now I'm maybe starting to figure it out.
I'm building my Attack on Titan style wall to keep out the Titans, right?
So they build the wall, 1,800 miles long, 100 feet high, to keep the Tetza at bay. And they start building these things called the Iron Kings, a series of mechs that will go in and hunt and kill the Tetsa. The nations dissolve as they do. Corporations, mega corporations, take their place, as we've seen before. And all of these corporations are concerned with developing, repairing, and improving these tools of war. Interestingly, some scientists are actually, curious to actually study the Tetsa, not just their biology, but also their linguistics. And we learn that, like, after 100 years, humanity still doesn't even know what they're actually saying. And part of this is the problem that this whole entire entertainment industry has been built around fighting the Tetsa, and that kind of goes up, has a sort of a problem when you're also trying to study them and simultaneously other people are trying to kill them. So, it's
So,
a
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But the book largely follows Anita Marr. She's a jockey that pilots one of these Iron Kings. She's just 2 kills off the top of the leaderboard, but she's not really that concerned with setting records, unlike some of the other people are. She's also the first pilot to get to, pilot. Sorry that it's a noun and a verb, everyone. This new cutting edge mech called the Dawnrunner. And the Dawnrunner is supposed to bridge this language barrier between man and machine to make them truly of one mind. Similar concept to some of the things we've certainly seen in Pacific Rim about, the drift and all of that other stuff that I don't really remember perfectly, but I know it's a big part of it. And of course, it's kind of ironic that they're like, we need to figure out the language barrier between man and machine, but we're also never going to learn what is going on with the Tetsa because we don't care. We want them dead. And during this maiden voyage, Mars' consciousness ends up weirdly merging with that of another individual called Major Ichiro Takeda. But who is he? Why is this happening? What are the secrets in technology creating this new mech and this attempt to fuse man and machine? It's a good variation on a theme. Obviously, it is not the most unique thing we've ever seen, but also, whatever they said years ago, there's only 7 true stories that you can actually tell, and everything else is a variation on a theme, and it's just a question of how good of a variation it is. I think this is a pretty good variation on a theme. Kaggle is one of those artists where you look at their work and you're like, how have I never seen your stuff before?
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
Have I seen your stuff before? I know. I think I'd know for sure if Comic Book DB was working again.
Right.
So it's been X amount of years since we brought that up. So there it is. There's definitely some sort of manga influences in the line work and the character and mech designs, but there's also kind of some Franco-Belgian influences in the lightness and flatness of the characters. I'd love to know what Kaggle's artistic inspirations are, because they really seem, from the outside looking in, to be quite varied. Kaggle did do the main covers for Strange Skies over East Berlin, which for me was arguably the most memorable part of that book. That's not a knock, okay? The covers were amazing. I always think of those, but that was Kaggle.
Right. They also did Detective Comics too, right? Like a bunch of the Rom V Detective Comics, I think.
Yeah, and the main cover duties for The Witcher Fading Memories miniseries a few years back. So it's always interesting to see these artists that seem largely known for cover work breaking into interiors, because sometimes that transition to sequential artwork can be sort of a rough one. But Kaggle seems like a real natural. Also want to point out that while the color palette is somewhat muted at points, it's actually a really varied color palette. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, did someone finally pay for Dave Stewart to like renew his Photoshop license, or did someone finally convince him to stop working with the trial version of whatever? And now he's not
Dave
just
Stewart
doing black, red, and like shades of orange on occasion.
He's never gonna come on this show now. He's
never gonna.
I'm gonna tell him where you
Dave,
live,
we love you.
just so that he can hunt you down for that remark. Nick, come on now.
Yeah. Look, we love Dave. I love Dave's Hellboy work. It is sort of blacks, grays, reds, and occasionally orange.
Well,
And
that's
I
Hellboy
love
for
it
you.
for
I was
that.
gonna say that's Hellboy. Like
So-
that Hellboy has 7 colors, right? And that's it, right?
Yeah.
4 of them are grays.
So I was really shocked when I found out that he was the one coloring this book. It looks great. It really looks great. And kudos to Dave. You shocked me. You surprised me. I would have never guessed this was you, and it looks amazing. And if you're at all interested in mech stuff, if you're interested in sci-fi stuff, if you're interested in a little bit of futurism and maybe a little post-apocalyptic stuff, there's a little bit of something here for everyone. You really ought to be reading this book.
Okay. Yeah, this was going to be my top of my pile pick this week. Because I very much meant to read this book. I bought the first 2 issues, never read them, and then I saw number 3 was coming out. So yeah, you've doubly sold me on this book. Like, obviously, I think the notes that I had originally written for today's episode were like, if Ram V's name is on the cover, you should buy it, right? Like, at this point, anything that he's doing has been incredible. Can't say that it's going to work for everybody, but personally, I've had very, very, very good experiences with the vast majority of his books. So yeah, and then seeing Evan Cagel's art, it looks incredible. Especially like some of those Detective Comics covers have been just like jaw-dropping. So the fact that they're doing interiors is very, very exciting. So yeah, anyways. Nick, I'm very glad that you reminded me of this book. And I'm glad that I happened to see it on the upcoming polls that were coming out. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today's episode though. Any final thoughts? Any last minute plugs you guys want to get in before we wrap up?
I've also been reading Kaiju number 8. Finally caught up on that. Check it out. It's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah, I'm slowly but surely continuing to make my way through Naruto. So one day I'll be able to say, I know what the little hand signals mean. At this point, I can't figure it out. So
Mike will finish reading One Piece and Naruto and then Ascend.
yes. I think once I finish that, I will be properly ready. Once One Piece eventually ends. But I think that's going to do it for this week. Thank you everybody for listening. This was a really fun episode, and I hope you had a good time listening to us ramble and take shots at Dave Stewart.
We love you, Dave.
Thank you to everybody listening live on Discord. You're fantastic human beings. Thank you to Kait for proof listening this episode. Thank you to Zander for editing. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.